I'm well aware that I'm standing between you and the lunch, so I will do my best not to exceed my 20 minutes. And it turned out to be a very interesting point because originally I planned to present this study just as it is. But given everything we've heard here today, starting from this excellent introduction and the panel, which touched on many of these issues that the study actually uncovered, all the way to the presentation of my colleague from KPMG, which maybe put some challenging statements and some of which are actually somewhat contradicted by the study, but some of which are supported. I'll make it a little bit more interactive, if you allow me to, within the time allotted. I'll go through the study results fairly quickly. If those of you who are more interested in this, happy to share even more data and with the white paper that accompanies it. So it is my pleasure to present to you this C-suite study, which is 19th in its series. It's a study that we conduct every 2 years or so by the IBM Institute of Business Value. And in conjunction this year, last year, it was conducted with Oxford Economics, and also 4 different academic institutions participated in it. I should also say that my presentation here is thanks to our sponsor GBM, so I appreciate them inviting me here to present on this. The study itself, and okay, there's some delay. All right, the study was worldwide, so all the figures that you will see are not specific to Oman in any way, but they are specific to banking and financial markets. Collate the input from over 1,600 C-level execs over the 6 roles that you see on this chart. And the study total was almost 13,000 executives that we interviewed, some of them in person, some of them over the phone. The analysis of this study was done using both quantitative and qualitative methods and fairly sophisticated semantic analytics, clustering techniques, and so on. So the study objective was to give us some data point as to what, where the future is for the industries, including banking. And some of the signals that we received are not very directive, not very informative. So one of them as an example, right, where the market will be in the next 2 to 3 years. Some of executives are telling us that the focus will be more on the established markets. Others are saying more on the new markets. That shift is almost 50-50, distribution is almost 50-50 this year. Another data point that shifted from 2 years ago when that study was previously conducted has to do with the innovation. And as you can see from that data point, the shift is actually more towards the internal innovation being more important in the next 2 to 3 years, which means that the banks now begin to de-emphasize the role of these fintechs that are that was very prevalent in 2015. Whether that will happen or not, of course, remains to be seen, but that internal innovation is clearly very important for the banks. Everybody agrees, though, that on these 2 data points, which also were confirmed earlier, what we've heard from the panel, for example, right? The critical importance of customer experience and over the products that are being sold and distributed by the banks. That customer experience is more, of course, than just, say, a mobile user interface, right? It's a holistic sense that the customer gets when they interact with an institution. One of the aspects that's frequently underestimated, and it was also discussed at the panel, is the issue of trust. Customers trust banks to preserve their money. They don't necessarily trust banks today to take their best interest at heart and to serve them in the best possible way, right? All those scandals that plague the banking sector. Just today I was reading about the one in Australia, right, which was considered one of those safest and most honest banking markets in the world, and suddenly it turns out that it isn't so. That impacts very negatively this notion of a broader customer experience. So the emphasis on this and the importance of that is very important, very critical to keep in mind as you design your digital banking transformation journeys. The other data point is also interesting, right? It talks about this importance of collaboration, partnering. And as you will see in a bit, those banks that are really good at digital transformation collaborate more. It's not in the nature of our industry, as the colleague before me told you as well, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that no one collaborates. We talked about cybersecurity. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the organization called FS-ISAC, which is mostly based in the US and Western Europe, but it was created for that very purpose of exchanging information about cybersecurity threats, and it's now I don't believe that any of the banks here belong to it, given the discussion earlier, but this is an example of a collaboration that is good for everybody. In many situations, the blockchain scenarios are also of that kind, right? Blockchain, by very definition, is distributed and decentralized, and the block creation of an effective blockchain ecosystem frequently means that you need to invite your competitors to it. In terms of, before we get going into some deeper topics, this is just one data point or set of data points about what bankers consider, what factors bankers consider the most impactful in the next years to come. And if you recall, the very first question of the panel today was about the importance of macroeconomic factors. So it's good to see that one on top, right? The ones that haven't changed in the last 2 years are the importance of market factors and, of course, the technology. And closely related to technology are people skills. And as I understand, you have some challenges when it comes to this here in Oman. It's something that you need to really seriously address, right? Because without people, without quality folks who can tell you where the technology is going, what can be accomplished with it, you stand no chance competing with those who have access to those skills. Okay, so as we analyze the responses from the survey, we identified 3 different groups of respondents. So again, we're looking at that set of over 1,600 executives from companies all over the globe, banking. And we've identified roughly 24–25% of them who are in that category of reinventors, who are truly innovative and are able to do all the things that we talked about earlier on today. They are able to collaborate with fintechs, they are able to innovate, they are able to take advantage of new technologies in the right way. The biggest group is in the middle. And actually, banking has a larger group of those companies than the population at large. If you look at the total survey, it was about 40%. In banking, it's 47%. And those folks are aware of the technologies and issues related here to these 7 variables that you see, but are not quite there in terms of actual performance. And then the lowest group, the aspirationals, those are the ones that are really falling behind. If you look at some of those characteristics in a little bit more detail, you see that, for example, for aspirationals, they don't even maybe have the right vision in place, as compared to the reinventors who have very well aligned strategy, IT, and business operations. So where you are individually, I leave it to you, but most of the follow-on discussion that I will spend the next 10 minutes on will be focused on what reinventors are doing, because that's what you all should be aspiring for the reasons that my colleague has told you about. People need banking, though you don't necessarily need banks. So what are the 4 themes that emerged from our analysis? That's what they are. The one is that there is this group of reinventors that really is able to now start moving, or has started moving forward much faster than their competitors. So I wouldn't quite agree with the statement that no banks innovate, that no banks can do what's necessary. There are some who do and some who can, but there is this big pull behind them that is not. The Three other topics that I'll talk about in more detail. The second one is this issue, the need for personalization. So ultimately, customer experience comes down to each individual. And that's one example of where technology may help, because at the end of the day, 7 billion is not a big number so for computers of today. So there are technical capabilities to really personalize the service to each and every individual, to each and every one of us. If you know what you're doing, if you have the data about that person, and if you have the right computational and algorithmic capabilities to do so. And that will be a critical differentiator going forward, because at the end of the day, each person is unique, or at least they think about themselves as unique, and that's how they want to be served, right? I don't want to receive a call from my bank, which I currently do, because I don't like being interrupted by mobile phone calls, right? I would much rather have them send emails. They cannot record it right now. They have no way of handling it. And that's one of the many ways in which they disappoint me, and sooner or later I will change the bank. The third topic, we didn't talk about it earlier as much, so this is maybe a little bit new, right? Is the emergence of the platform business models. It's something that is, you can think of Amazon or Google or Facebook, of course. Those are centralized platforms. But think also of all those blockchain networks that are being formed. These are platforms as well. They are distributed platforms, right? And once you become a member of it, you participate in it in a certain way. That platform business model is quite important going forward for the industry. Lastly, is this whole notion of becoming an agile enterprise. It's so underestimated that it really makes my heart pain. Because at the end of the day, every innovation that you introduce is just one point action. If you spend a lot of money and effort doing it, and you are so exhausted that you cannot introduce another innovation to your organization, you will not succeed. On the other hand, if you're agile, if you have this thing we call operational dexterity, and you truly can innovate quickly, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you make some mistakes along the way. Everybody will, right? There will be technologies that will go obsolete. There will be dead ends. But you will be able to recover quickly. So that's a critical ability that some of those reinventors have, others not so much. At this point, I want to quickly play a video created by the State Bank of India, about their new venture. And I invite you to listen to this video. This is not an IBM commercial, this is their work. And try to see some of the themes in it, okay? So let's play that video, if you may, please. The video? Thank you. So you only need one. Okay, very quickly, a show of hands, right? Did you see this? Clearly it was an incumbent, right? State Bank of India, so the number one is check. Did you see the personalization in this idea? Yes? Personalized, right? I can plan my own travel. I can see which money have I blown versus not, right? So there is this notion of personal service. Platform, it is clearly a platform, right? They didn't build a new reservation service, nor did they build a new ticketing application, right? Those are interfaces to existing apps somewhere else, or capabilities. Are they agile? Have they done it in an agile sort of way? 36 months is the time of the implementation. Sorry, less than 24, less than 2 years to launch that bank. And of course, they build it in a way that can be extended, right? So they will be adding to that. You only need one additional services as they go. So I would argue, yes, it was done in an agile way, and it's not a closed thing, right? It makes a lot of sense from a customer standpoint to have one app versus 6 or 7 or 9, or whatever the number is, right? Okay, so very quickly, given the time remaining, I will go through those 4 themes and then leave you with some thoughts for the future. This is the result of the question when we asked the industry where they think most of the innovation disruption will come from, right? Look at the number at the top, right? Innovative industry incumbents, 71%, right? So not to say that digital giants like Alibaba or Amazon are not important, but in the opinion of the industry, as of last year, the biggest threat comes from these innovative industry incumbents who know the industry, who have resources, who have customer data, and who know how to innovate. Okay? Correspondingly, right, the competition within the industry is expected to be much higher than the competition from outside of the industry. The CEOs still worry about the fintechs. In fact, they worry quite a lot. And look at the number of those that are afraid of disintermediation, right? Well over 55%. Now, what doesn't make sense is the next data point that I will show you, right? Only about 30% of them are worried about disintermediation. So that may go to what colleague from KPMG was talking about, right? That maybe some bankers are asleep at the wheel, right? They are worried, but they are not willing to do anything about it. That's at least a worrying data point to think about. Okay, in terms of personalization, we see maybe a big sign of overconfidence. 90% almost of you are telling us that you're pretty good at this, right? Yet when we look at the data in another survey, this is what we saw. So on the left-hand side, you see the ranking of customer factors by the banking executives, from the most important to the least important, okay? Those factors that would lead the customer to adopt digital initiative of the bank. On the right-hand side, you see the same factors ranked by the actual consumers, okay? Do you see the lines crossing, right? It means that they don't align. Please notice also that the cost is not the most important factor for the customers. It's the convenience. It's that immediacy. It's the 24/7. It's saving time, right? Making it easy for them to use. So yes, you can charge for this a premium if you're doing a good job, right? And no, you will not get your money if you're trying to give them something that, doesn't appeal to their needs, okay? I will be glad to share this chart with you in a one-on-one conversation. That should be on your desk when you're designing your digital strategy. Okay, as I mentioned, the reinventors are way ahead of the game here. How they do it using data and analytics. They also know how to employ technologies right. They understand what are the limitations of different tools. They don't deploy technology just for the sake of having a mobile app or being on the blockchain, right? They truly understand how to use those technologies right. Okay, very quickly through the platforms. We see quite a lot of interest in them. As you can see, over 50% of banks currently are at least considering, if not already experimenting with this model in some way, shape, or form. And as I mentioned, they will become more and more prevalent given all the trends that we see in terms of both ability to interface with many partners, introduction of technologies such as blockchain. Here, while the reinventors are ahead, the other groups are also participating. So it's not as bad as in other areas where some of the practitioners or aspirationals were really left behind. This is, you can see it's a bit more balanced picture. What truly sets reinventors apart is this ability to manage change, and that leads us to this next topic that I will be talking about in a moment, which is the organizational agility. This is really critical, and I cannot stress it enough. I already gave you my emotional state when I think about it. That's something that cannot be captured really in any one particular technology. So again, this is about how you operate, how you organize your work, how you deal with your people, rather than which technologies you use, right? So that notion of operational agility has three components. One is the clear vision, okay, where the industry is going, and you can see the data points for aspirationals, practitioners, and reinventors. And you can see that reinventors are always way ahead of everybody else in terms of understanding the industry, articulating the vision, and making sure that people actually participate in it through transparency and continual dialogue. The second is culture, right? So this is about engaging your employees, engaging also your partners, and in some cases even engaging your competitors, right? Being very transparent about this, being truthful and collaborating. There is a whole, there's a whole number of people who are promoting this kind of approach. I believe it is culturally compatible with the way you operate in Oman, and therefore, I would encourage you to adopt it. And lastly, it's the operations, right? It's investing in the right skills of your people, making sure that you have the right technology deployed to support it, and to rewarding the fast failure and allowing for that fast failure to be a learning experience for you. So to close out, some actions to take now. First of all, be very close to what's going on, right? Do not close your eyes on this rapid evolution that is happening. Maybe it hasn't yet reached Oman, but it certainly is very present in the neighboring countries, right? Dubai, is where I reside, is all about it. There is lots of lessons learned from mature markets and also from countries like China and India. So stay close to it, be alert to the developments, and bring them home in a way that makes sense for you. Also, don't try to stay passive, right? Try to figure out ways in which your bank can individually take advantage of that. There is a whole number of tactics that you can deploy, but certainly sitting and waiting is not one of them. The next one is to be flexible in terms of both allocation of your capital, but also developing a flexible foundation of your IT. You will not be able to take advantage of these fintechs that are out there if your IT is inflexible, is not modular, it's not open and able to integrate many of these capabilities. We've heard about it, that isolated capability doesn't make a good customer experience. Only the integrated capability does. And lastly, really commit yourself to deliberate experimentation, right? You cannot learn unless you do things, and you fail and you do them again, right? So that has to be a continuous effort of improvement and an agile, iterative approach. I would also put forth for you that areas such as security or compliance can be a source of competitive advantage for you. Customers certainly want you to offer them a secure service or secure services. Being compliant with regulations can be another source of building trust with your clients. So why not turn it into an advantage rather than treat it only as a cost? Those are some of the thoughts. I hope they were useful. as I mentioned, the study is available. We're happy to share it in more detail. And I don't know if we have some time for questions, few maybe, one or two.
Yes, my name is Muhammad Tayyib. I'm from Oman Arab Bank. I just want to ask a simple question. In this ever-changing technological world, what do you feel, how to align the strategy with the future? Because by the time maybe you finish what is applicable today, you come up, you finish your implementation, and the new technology is hitting the door. So how you come up, how you align the strategy with the future in terms of IT especially, where we are standing now?
Radical decomposition is the first step, right? So you need to really, if you're talking IT strategy, it's all about modularizing your entire IT in such a way that you can then either surround the legacy and put it aside, or get rid of it, or replace it as the need may be. You've seen that in, I think, Infosys presentation. There was a certain layered architecture that was proposed. Some variant of it, I would also say you need to adopt. So you need to know which components of that decomponentized architecture are for what. Are they, storing your system's data of record, or are they playing a role in the systems of insight or systems of engagement, whatever that may be? Okay? And that will allow you to kind of keep it evolving going forward. But it also goes to that notion of agility and constant change, right? It's the same with customer experience. It's the same with IT. It will continue to evolve. Right?
Lutfi Al-Shukeli, Al-Izz Islamic Bank. Based on your experience, I just want to understand, with the transformation that are happening in the first quadrant you've shown,
yes,
is it driven by the digital or the experience guys?
The
change.
So you're asking if the reinventors are doing it, are being led by the business,
or the experience,
or by experience being
the experience, the customer experience side.
The customer experience is very important, right? Okay. But of course, it has to serve a particular business strategy, right? So you need to know who your customers are that you're trying to serve. What are the differentiating elements of that service that you're trying to provide, right? So in the case of State Bank, right, they came up with a certain vision, and then they drove everything else from the customer experience that they wanted the customers to have. Integration, ease of use, seamlessness, intelligence that was built into that app, right, to simplify, for example, interactions, right? We've done a lot of work. Think of Apple, right? Apple applications and the iOS are famous for that good experience, right? When you have these nifty things that save you time, right? That's what we're talking about here, right? All right. I'm available for the rest of the day. Thank you.